We spoke about a lot of themes, and all of you, as part of the last few sessions, have been into understanding carbon footprinting, demystifying ESG, looking at CBAM, the carbon mechanism that's coming in now. What's next? What does this all hold for us? What's the progress on climate risk? What's the corporate road to net zero? And where does it leave us, some of us professionals in ESG, some of us in operations? What is it we need to do next? Small context here. I'm the head of governance for a SEBI registered ESG rating provider. I'm into ESG since 4 decades, as Chana said, into business excellence in QSHE. Been in various industries, been in chemicals, pharmaceuticals, paints, oil and gas, into refinery, set up a couple of renewables, wind, solar, been into metals and mining, been into IT-enabled services. And that's a little bit about me here. But to give you a feel of the Dashavatars at work, I've had various hats here into tech transfer, manufacturing, technology, NPD, quality assurance, also wore HR hat, been into ESG, HSE, HSSE, business excellence, process, quality improvements, and operation excellence here. Across the various gigs, on the left are the companies I've worked for. On the right are the companies that I've consulted for. And in the top is the companies that I've done projects for. So that's a little bit about me here. Had the opportunity to work across 4 decades. And I talk of 4 decades of ESG leadership, and that must come as a surprise to some of you, because ESG itself is not 4 decades old, but have done various things across these years. I'll try and introduce ESG also as a refresher, so you can understand what this is all about in a journey here. So going from a greenhorn to a doctorate in ESG, what has been the journey there? Let me explain this one by one so you'll understand what ESG is all about here. My first, as a trainee engineer, I was in a mine, and this mine was in a company called Navy Lignite. And this had a lot of incidents, a spate of incidents. And that was around the time that they went in for a safety cultural transformation. They say that the ultimate bottom line is social, it's all about the people. And this is what they did. It's now a Navratna Group company, NLCIL it is now, and it's come a long way since then. But the decision to go in and look at safety was what happened, and this happened 4 decades ago here. My second company was an Indian Rayons company, an Aditya Birla Group company. And this was into recycling of textiles. You know how textile goes? So a lot of wash that goes into rayon before it's purified and sent in for yarning here. Across these, there's a lot of, this is rayons recovery was one of the projects I did as a budding engineer here. The Indian ethos of RRR, recycle, reuse, and reduce, and something that the ancient set of principles that we use for resource management is something we also adopted here, did the entire recovery of these rayons. So this is exactly what was the typical concept of sustainability, reusing, the triple R they call it, which is all it began in the first kind of exposure I had to a chemical process industry here. I was in a pesticide company, agrochemical company, a Gada chemical company, where they set up a zero liquid discharge plant and an incinerator. What's so novel about sending that? That's a standard thing you'd say here. But this friend was around 35 years ago, when the pollution control norms itself never mandated having this here discharges. Also, this was the most polluted industrial estate in India. This was ahead of compliance. A lot of what ESG also is going ahead, going beyond compliance. Asian Paints was the company that I had an interesting exposure, one of the most mature companies, I'd say. But this announced the launch of a product, a decorative paint called Apcolloid Royal. Apcolloid Royal was supposed to be launched around Diwali, but sometime before D-Day, some months before it, there was a major fire at its mother factory in a plant in Mumbai called Bhandup. And this caused a major disruption. How do you manage the entire production? We were part of a couple of other plants in Patancheru and Ankleshwar. We set up a substantial capacity expansion, ramped up the capacity, and made it possible to make this decorative paint and launch it in time for the festive season here. So managing business continuity, managing interruptions is also a large part of what sustainability is all about. Dr. Chana and me worked together in a company called Castrol, where the quality transition, if you thought you were ISO 9001 company, you thought you're good, you're the ultimate in quality management systems. But that's the time when a lot of the OEMs came into India, the Fords, the Hyundais, the Nissans, and of course, the Indian companies also woke up there, Ashok Leyland and the rest, Nissan. So this is where the entire quality management system, the quality improvement, Ford came up with this FMEAs, the TS 1649, the standards went up. So those standards were pushed up here. So this is how the OEMs also raised the bar for quality in this company here. BP was the first company where we put up Asia's first project of wind farm, and this was in a place called Dhule, and this is where the entire carbon credits for BP was got here. Why does a British company want to put up a project in Maharashtra in India? You might ask there. If you know what is the climate change, what is causing the entire, the global warming there, it's not anything that's happened of late. It's about the emissions that started around the industrial revolution, around the 1850s, around when it started, not in most of the other Europe's, more not in Americas, but largely in Europe. And this is where the mandate came in for those companies. They call it the global north, to reduce the carbon footprint and economies of scale, and of course the cost made it easy to do it in countries like India here, to make up for all the emissions that all began with the industrial revolution and causing the climate impacts change today. So what we're suffering today was what happened around that time there. This also goes back to a refinery that I worked in a company called SR, where we tried to acquire a bigger giant, a Shell refinery in UK here. And when we went in, I was part of the due diligence team. When we went in there, you expect a red carpet, right? But what happened was there wasn't much of a reception there. They asked us, "Who are you?" Almost it was the other way around. How good are you to acquire us? So the pull for sustainability from a global giant is what kickstarted an oil and gas company's ESG reporting. So it works both ways, right? You think at a merger and acquisition, you are the king here. You guys do the due diligence, but also ask how good are you to acquire us here. I was a global head at Dr. Reddy's, a mature company. 20 years it had been in business there and reporting, and all we did was make a 24-page report to help it there. But there was a due diligence from tough customers, especially GSK, and the pressures that came in. We had a spate of incidents there, and for 1 year we dropped the reporting. And the question, and we hired DuPont to do a sustainable journey there on safety there. But the questions they asked us into why did you not report? Is there a gap in openness, transparency? Made us really reach beyond. We speak about getting sustainable design. As we speak tomorrow, I'm going to visit Dr. Reddy's after multiple years there, after around 13, 14 years. They come a long way here on diversity, equity, inclusion, the top of the rank on the CRISIL rating. So it's come a long way. But this was a push from tough customers. So customers drive the organization's approach and methodology there. They drive them well here. Likewise, in the pharma sector, the company called Orchid, and I think acquired by Hospira. Some of you from Aurangabad might be aware of that. This was part of the integration in Pfizer. But how this went ahead to look at the pharmaceutical supply chain initiative for suppliers, third parties, toll manufacturers, to ensure everyone was connected, was the journey that also takes care of others. So third parties integrating them, raising the bar on expectations of suppliers, the entire external stakeholders, that universe also was what a lot of companies, including Pfizer and Hospira, did. And that's what raises the bar on the organization and beyond it. I was in a group project company on Tata's called Tata Projects there. So project lasts around 9 months to 2 years. And the question they asked is, what is it we can do? We might not have scope for design so much. What can we do really in 9 months or a 12-month project? And the group again pushed and pulled its weight there. And in the competition L&T that it was, it mandated a sustainability reporting here. Convinced Tata Projects to do a maiden sustainability report with an assurance in its first year. From a simplified or create, it went into a sustainable success story. So some of us are part of multinationals, group companies that drive the mandate, and that's where ESG sometimes comes in here. In the world's biggest renewable at that time, Sterling and Wilson Solar, the biggest emerging solar player, with a lot of lockdown learnings, this company waited for a listing. The IPO attracted global customers, but all of them wanted a qualification for global customers was requiring ESG reporting there. So it was in the pandemic that we really got together, did the carbon footprinting, carbon abatement, did a net carbon neutrality in its first year of reporting. And that's where I think the marketplace, the investors, and that's where ESG really comes from, the investors. When they demand a company do something, that's when you need to get into the journey of sustainability there. I was in the Middle East where a company called Granules said they had a very poor ESG rating and said, "Humne to kuch kiya hi nahi, we've done nothing." And they said the reason is that we're not reported much, we're not had any disclosures. The thrust to improve the ratings by an S&P global company is what drove them to get into sustainability journey. Also going to meet them day after to see what they've done the last 5-6 years. A big journey from going from a poor rating, almost a single digit, to now 54 plus into one of the branded companies there. So ratings also drive a lot of companies' status and progress on sustainability. Likewise, as Chana said, it was not mandatory in the past, but now the SEBI push for BRSR, the Business Responsibility Sustainability Reporting, that's really got companies like Blue Star into the ESG journey. The net zero targets that we'll speak about, even in hard to abate sectors like iron and steel, got us to using green steel, using hydrogen at Jindal Steel, a metals and mining company here. The push for life of mines extension in a Rosing uranium mine in Namibia, Africa. We spoke about our HSSE risk here. After 40 years of mining, how do you extract the mine? How do you extract the uranium still? How do you extend the line? So it's also ensure the continuity, the business continuity, and stretch the life cycle. That also is business continuity here. Currently, like I said, leading the governance, a lot of the companies talk about big things there. Like they say, badi badi baatein, but vada pav khate. There's a lot of greenwashing that happens. So this is what also is important to understand what the expectation of the marketplace is to be, clear, open, and transparent reporting. We all like to report the good news, but also reporting the bad news is very important here. So, friends, what I given is the context and introduction to my journey, as also explaining what ESG is, because all of these elements goes into form ESG, which is why this is so holistic and makes it very interesting for all of us to jump into here. So, friends, what we'll cover today is we spoke about the 2030 countdown. What is the deadline for 2030? There's a 4 years left now. What is it we are doing? We spoke about the SDG. We'll understand what it is and also look at the stock take here. Climate on the foreline, what the world is becoming hotter and hotter, although it's raining as we speak now, but it's getting drier, hotter. What is the climate change that's happening there? A lot of vision of the companies is 2030. From pledges to delivery, this is what you're talking about, the net zero, carbon, water, waste. Marketplace is changing, the regulation as we speak is changing. As we speak, also there's opportunity for ESG professionals where demand, skills, and the talent gaps are really heading. What was short term in the past is now not at all kind of, it happens in the split of a second there. What's medium and long term now used to be 5-10 years is now less than 3 years. A long service award used to give for people who work 10 plus years. Can you imagine any of the current generation really working that long, that hard? Not at all. So like we said, we'll do around 40 minutes plus of sessions and we'll try and get you at least half an hour of question and answer there. So friends, with that as the context here, let's begin with the 2030 countdown. This short session is theme 2030. So what's 2030 all about here? And we say the ESG is the way it began was the sustainable development goals. To give you a refresher on what we've done in the past year, from the agenda 21 to 2030, the global journey towards people, planet, and partnership. There's been decades of work behind a global agenda, and the journey had 5 milestones. Let's look at this at a small gap here. The SDGs was built on a decade of work by countries of the United Nations, including the UN DISA. DISA is the Department of Economic and Social Affairs there. As it began, there's a story of how the world's shared plan for people and planet took shape, one summit at a time. Dr. Chana spoke about the Paris. We'll explain each of these as we began here. It began with the Earth Summit, Agenda 21 in 1992. Brazil didn't quite make it into this FIFA World Cup, but that Rio de Janeiro in 1992, that's when more than 178 countries adopted this agenda of plan of action to build a global partnership for sustainable development to improve human lives. And the focus was on human lives and, of course, protecting the environment there. That was 1992. The Millennium Summit, and initially called the MDGs. It is called the Millennium Developmental Goals here. And this was a milestone in New York, USA, around where the final World Cup happened. The member states unanimously adopted the Millennium Declaration at the UN headquarters and led to 8 MDGs aimed at largely reducing extreme poverty by 2015. This happened in 2000 here. Cut to Joburg in South Africa. There's a third milestone there, where the Joburg Declaration and Plan of Implementation reaffirmed the global commitments to poverty eradication and the environment. It built upon Agenda 21 and the Millennium Development, a greater emphasis on multinational partnerships here. That was 2002. The Rio Plus 20 is the future we want. And again, in 2012, the countries came together, the member states adopted the outcome document, the future we want. And this is where the SDGs took shape, building on the MDGs, and established a high-level political platform with mandates for development, for financing and small island developing states. We look at what are the small islands and what is the global north and what's the global south and the global middle. But this was 2012. And then there was in 2013 and 15, a period of shaping the goals where the open working group came in, the agenda that came in, the 17 SDGs at the core, and the agenda was set in place there here. 2015 saw the landmark year where the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction in Ethiopia, Agenda for Financing for Development, and again the SDGs agenda finally came in September 2015, and December was the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. This is something that really is a benchmark year, a watermark year in transforming the world, and this is what it also adopted in the UN Sustainable Development Summit in New York in 2015. But the Paris Agreement actions largely is around adaptation, ambition, finance, loss and damage, and the Paris Rulebook holds countries accountable for all of these here. So implementing the Paris Rulebook, and this is what we speak about, the 1.5 degree, all these is what came up from the Paris Agreement here. So this is the states of the Paris Agreement, the action that came out there, and driving the agenda forward. The UN DESA provides substantial support and capacity building for the SDGs. It spans all these elements. We look at each of these, but evaluation and advocacy is what the Division for Sustainable Development Goal does here. It's a central platform for the SDGs at a global level to ensure the review of the SDGs happens out here. So making this 2030 agenda a reality is something that all of us looked at here. A lot of companies really, when they look at SDG mapping, they're totally confused. They really don't know what to look at here. Even I was in a company there when I looked at how do I map, say, biodiversity. What do I do about biodiversity? How do I need to report in? And we thought, let's plant some more trees or get in some more birds. What do we do? Finally, we went in and planted and got a solar plant in a wildlife forest close to the factory. But again, understanding brand ownership, it's something required for the shared strong commitment by all stakeholders to deliver the global goals here. So again, here, like I said, the SDGs, these are the 17 SDGs, very time bound here. And these are from 1 to 0 poverty and 0 hunger, which is where the MDGs started, to good health and well-being. Going forward to all the other SDGs is what has happened here. So the SDGs are well mapped. Each of these has a connect there. Number 4 is access to education, EdTech here. 5 is about gender diversity. You can see the logos are pretty impressive and very explanatory here. This is what the SDGs came in here. The ESG, for example, if you want to map the ESG to the SDGs here, each of these has a mapping there. For example, the E and S for poverty, and 0 hunger and good health and well-being and quality education comes in where. Gender equality also has the G for governance of the financial year. So each of these is well mapped out here. So ESG also can be split into the SDGs, and this is the way it works here. You can map it. Everything has a mapping here. Likewise here, you can map it to the Global Compact, and all of these principles of the United Nations Global Compact can be mapped there. Also, with industries also, what are the relevant industries? Because very important for companies that start off with a ESG reporting and don't understand what is the ESG, what is the SDG to pick, which element to pick here. So this is where top impacts for industry. A chemical industry, for example, has climate action at the top here. A technology company has decent work in economic growth as it happens here. Healthcare obviously looks at SDG 3, good health and well-being. So that's how this pans out here. Each of these sectors, the health and safety and food and agriculture sector, has various elements that need to attain the SDGs. And so the mapping across each of these in various oil and gas, including, as it might say, what is oil and gas, metals and minerals, hard to abate sectors. But the mapping of the SDG really helps them connect and understand what are the material chapters there. Green buildings, likewise, also, I think the World Green Building Council in India, there's IGBC, all of them also connect with SDGs and try and map them appropriately here. There is across geographies also a mapping of the SDGs and a progress there. What is the status of the deployment? Is it substantial, deteriorating, continuous? And also across each of the countries, there is a performance rating that happens there. Finland, per se, the Scandinavian countries relative to the top there for what they've done. So this is where the country goals, including for the states. Each of the states also and the union territories also have the mapping in India there. So that's the interesting part. And this is the rating by Niti Aayog on where they are, the top 12 states and the bottom 5 states and the top 5 union territories. So SDGs are well mapped there, and how they are actually done. The World Meteorological Organization also maps the future there. How are they connected? So the high impact events that's happening, the ocean acidification, the CO2 concentration, the additional greenhouse gas effects, the high impact events that's happening, a cold wave, cyclones, tsunamis, droughts, flooding, the slowdown of the global thermohaline circulation, all of the El Nino that's coming in there, all of these are very well connected there. And that's why all of these are impacted by the SDGs there. So what does it call for? The call for action is to integrate SDGs into business operations. That's what it called for here. How we do it? This is what is explained there in some of the actions that we can take up here. Not very complicated, simple as we can do, but understanding this is very important for all of us and industry especially here. But then how have we done? Now we understood what is the SDG. How have we done? What's the progress there? The progress is real, but is it at a pace that's good enough? It's too slow to reach 2030 there. So 35% of the SDG targets are on track or showing moderate progress, only 35%. So it's say this real and substantial, but fragile and unequal. So half the targets are advancing very slowly or making very limited progress, and 18% targets are regressed below that 2015 baseline there. This calls for a global development emergency, is what the UN states here. And I guess this is where they say that only 1 in 3 targets is on course here. And they say 35% are on track, moderate progress, 47% advancing too slowly or limited, 18% are regressing there. So this is where the challenge is for all that we speak. After all is said and done, far more is said, very little done. So that's the challenge facing all of us. If you look at the scorecard on SDG, some way to go. So then there's millions lifted up. That was the kind of action that we came in for the MDGs here, but yet there are millions left behind here. So what the world gained is education. 100 million plus children and youth gained education. The infections went down since 2010. The power of various countries has gone up here. Electricity access has improved there. Tropical disease has kind of been eliminated there. But what the gaps even on the right are the ones that is there. There's still 800 million people still in extreme poverty. People 1 in 11 still having experienced hunger. A lot of companies, they adopt this SDG, looks at eliminating hunger there. Drinking water, access to these slums or proper settlements is where people lack what they have here. And displacement has been doubled since 2015. So if you look at the stock take on SDGs, some way to go, friends. The steepest climbs in 2013, zero hunger, 9.1. Quality education, 57%. So that's been some upgrade here. Clean water, I think 2.2 billion lakh safe drinking water. Decent work, 12.9%. And again, life below water. You're talking about life below water. 40% of the targets are regressing. You look at the IPCC reports, there's a big challenge there. And again, finally, the consumption and land is 40% of targets there. So I guess the steepest climbs to 2030 are these. These are the challenges. And if you want to look at it, take goals with respect to entities there, this is what you need to focus on in your small little way here. Right, friends, ambitions outruns the financing. This is the money problem. So basically, SDG financing, this is the gap here. And this is where the record debt servicing cost for low and middle income countries is $1.4 trillion there. So you can see that the 6 priority areas, given the balance there, the drop in official development assistance, this is where the funding gap actually is. The 6 priority areas, food systems, energy access, digital transformation, education, jobs and social protection, climate and biodiversity. These are the ones that we really need to look at and focus on here. So that's the final verdict on SDGs and where we are. And I guess that brings us to the other big burning question there. And that's the fire that's happening there. That's climate, where the burning gets the earth hotter, drier, and longer here. So in this climate and climate change here, this is something that is really scary there. And for the last 6 years, Siberia in 2021, wildfires scorched more. So this is the kind of area that's been scorched there here, right? Although they say the nature kind of has its way of turning around, it's very regressive, but also takes care of itself, the cycle that takes care of itself. There's been challenges even in Siberia there. Icebergs are melting. My last stint in the pandemic was in Australia. This is where it started here. The big fires in Australia there across the months here. My last gig was in Namibia. When I came in there, this was the Etosha forest, which had the scarred elephant as one of the memories that comes in there. The wildfire that engulfed the animals that burned to death out here. And recently, and yet what this is, friends? Which state, which country? Yeah, very much in the news of recent region. This is the fire that happened after the last football final. Yeah. So around this time is when there's a lot of protests there because of the fires in Canada. A lot of the impact happened, even in countries where the places or the football matches were hosted there. The fires affected, and there's a lot of hydration breaks given in between every half. But this is where the challenge came in, the impacts of climate change. And also there were challenges about the diversity, equity, inclusion. Argentina and Spain, an all-white team versus a kind of mixed team. Some people like Iran, the war that happened, countries that are not allowed to enter some countries there, some officials who are not able to qualify. So diversity, equity, inclusion, climate change, all these are mixed feedbacks from the impact of climate change here. So the paradox is the less land burned, the more carbon is released here. So again, looking at it, the global burnt area versus the fire emissions, you can see that across the last 2 years, 2024-25, the fire season versus long-term average since 2003, that's the last 3 years, 8 billion tons of carbon dioxide has been emitted, sixth highest on record, even though there was 9% less land burned there. What happens is the fire hits dense carbon-rich forests. It happened in the Americas. It happened recently as well. California burning there. Emissions is 4 times the average in Bolivia, 3 times in Canada, where the recent fire just happened here. So the global fire emissions top the fossil fuel output of 200 plus countries. And there's a global shocker that there's a whopping kind of increase there. And again, this is something that is interesting. There's a movie I saw the last week called 300 degrees. So 300 degrees is the temperature at which the wood actually ignites there. That's the flashpoint, the details on auto-ignition and wood here. The hotter, drier vegetations cross that 300-degree threshold faster, and climate extremes preload the fuel, and that's what caused the forest fires there. So again, the challenge here is the cost when fires break out here. This is the kind of people exposed to wildfires worldwide, the losses, assets globally, and the people who are evacuated. You must have heard of what's happened in Eaton, California, and the Palisades fire there. And again, the WHO Air Quality Index. Closer home, you know what's happening in the capital there. All the fire that happens, the kind of the farmers who burn their entire, plants and stuff there, is what causes the pollution levels to go high and the air quality index in Delhi to dip here, apart from what's happening right there. So again, globally also, this is statistics of what's happened there. The damages that's there are intense here, the heavy costs of fires there. And again, you talk of fire seasons are going longer and fiercer. In spite of our global increase in firefighting technology here, I think the extreme wildfire activity has been twice more than last 20 years. Plus the rise in forest fire emissions in 2021 to 2023, the last 22 years here. So what drives the forest fires here? So the boreal forest fire emissions have tripled since 2021. The Canada 23 season is the warmest and driest in 1980. In fact, all the summers as we speak have the highest ever since the last decade or more here. The fire seasons now start earlier and run a month longer. More than 35 years ago, it's kind of go higher here. The warmer nights keep the fires burning overnight. The zombie fires smolder through the winter, and this bigger challenge to kind of extinguish it regardless of the technology and our ability to improve it better here. I guess this is where the challenge is on fires there. Like Dr. Channa mentioned, a long time ago in one of the conference of parties, the COPs as I mentioned, we all took pledges to delivery. Where did this come from? And this came from the UN Conference of Parties there. This happened in Glasgow there. In the UN Climate Change Conference in 2021 in UK, we made some pledges, including taking a net carbon target here. And 2070 was the net zero. But we also said we'll do a lot of things in 2030, you can say here, including move away from fossil fuels is what we said here. A lot of companies then, and you understand what is net zero, it's the balance where emissions of the greenhouse gases, the GHGs, are offset by the absorption or equivalent amount from the atmosphere here. Again, with this as the target here, a lot of companies took targets 2030, a lot of them took pledges, a lot of countries also took a lot of, India Inc. The public sector units had targets thrust upon them, a lot of companies had it voluntary. There was a lot of reporting that happened. The reporting, you had to look at progress year on year, you got to do better here. So with that as a challenge there were 4 commitments defining Vision 2030. One of the net zero, that also got a pressure on scope 3, water neutrality and being water positive, waste, and finally the circular economy. These were the 4 commitments that defined Vision 2030. Friends, 2030 is very close by, you can say here, but this is the targets a lot of companies, a lot of countries took here. How have we done across these here? Pledges are now hardening into accountability, and the shift is as the net zero commitments accelerate, the moving from all the PR, the public relations work we're doing to strategy here. Companies are now getting accountable for even the entire value chain, the supply chain also coming through here. AI, blockchains, and a lot of companies are setting up, there's call centers coming up, there is GCCs coming up. What about the consumptions? The question they ask, a lot of public information is going around here. But the impact investing is set to exceed 50 trillion funding clean tech and green infrastructure. A lot of companies in practice, like they said, 2030, 2035, 2045, set targets on decarbonization. There are pledges there, but again, the hard part is how do we really progress on them here, including water. This is the next world war is going to be fought. This was on oil, on water here. Being water positive, a lot of companies have taken targets here. And the stakes here, I come from a state in Telangana, in Hyderabad, the water comes in tankers, in industries, in homes here. Groundwater, and again, with the this being the GCC hub there, the challenges of how we can survive on water there. The kind of people going to be affected are humongous there. Looking at how waste comes in, designing wastewater systems from take, make waste to keep in use, circular economy, speak about zero waste to landfill, circular design, talking of waste neutrality onto the closed loop packaging, water, minerals here. A lot of companies have taken up initiatives. Speaking of the couple that we speak about, one that I was working with and one that I kind of sustained and kind of supported there, Tech Mahindra. So this is where in companies in practice doing a lot of work there. How good is it is the question we're asking here. And again, this comes back to the regulations here. What drives these companies to do what they do here? The ESG market and regulation is what drives a lot of companies there. The ESG market, it's ruled by, of course, SEBI in India, but globally is the market there here. There are a lot of changes in the Indian market. We've been through some of the CBAM and some of the mechanisms globally also. In India also, there are some changes that's coming up here. So what is it that the regulations are scaling ESG for? So the green tech and sustainability, I think a lot of green funding is happening there. And what gets the focus there? Green tech and sustainable projects get the green funding there. And there's a broader market there. So mandatory ESG reporting is going global and across Europe and of course in India, the GRI, TCFD and the ISSB all coming through. AI has been a boon here. What earlier was causing a lot of pains to do, at end of the year, you do a post-mortem, you don't get much data there, but you can get analytics that's fairly real time. Moving from reactive to proactive strategies now possible there. Satellite carbon tracking and automated audits make disclosures verifiable. In India also, as we speak, the space technology, the space route that's come up there, the Indian Space Research Organization has let the entire space technology, including the jet propulsion, go private. A lot of private players are doing it well. Last week, we had the first private company that set out its first rocket there into space here at Thumba. Investors and regulators are now demanding comparable, assured ESG data. A lot of companies, even in the BRSR, would kind of put in very something that's hubris. Anything that is there year on year, if you look at the reports, there's not much of change there. There's no real content there. But the focus on assurance, the focus on the challenges by investors is now coming up there. And so what is forcing the pace there? I know once upon a time, I had reported in a company long time ago that we have a diversity, equity, inclusion approach here, and very proudly said that. This was again around 13 years ago, but we got a call from a company, Sustain Analytics, somewhere in Amsterdam, and they said, "What is your D&I policy? How do you define diversity? Is there a target here? What's the goals? Is there an approach? Is there a policy?" And we had none of that, frankly. But disclosures and questions that's asked by investors, regulators, and analysts is what drives companies to look at reporting and assured data there. That's what is changing the entire marketplace there. The forces that's reshaping the ESG strategy is becoming mandatory. Earlier, ESG reporting was voluntary there. It wasn't something that was mandated there. And even in India, as we spoke about the NBG and the BRSR that's coming now, started with the top 500, the top 100, top 1,000 companies listed on market cap there. But now, SEBI is slowly getting teeth in now. Disclosure becoming the law, not a choice there. A shift has happened there. Also, this technology is coming now, AI in ESG. Allocation of capital, green capital is coming. Sustainable finance is now what's steering the capital there. The project has been assessed. Companies like World Bank and IFC kind of assuring project, looking at it and doing a due diligence. Only then will the funding come in. A lot of standards are converging. We had the GRI, the good old GRI earlier, but right now all the standards are coming together. There's one global baseline that's emerging. A lot of us who are looking at getting the GRI certification as we speak here, understand there's a change that's happening to understand it's taking the fragmented reporting maze together here. Scope 3 was again something that was voluntary and therefore was left out here. But the ownership of the entire footprint has come in now. Companies are now answerable for the full value chain, not just the direct emissions, that is scope 1 and 2. And going beyond carbon, looking at nature and diversity there. Nature positive goals and the task force for financial also extend the ESG past the climate alone. So that's this direction of the ESG strategy, the forces that's shaping them here. Friends, the frameworks here The front runner is the EU CSRD, the ISSB, the IFRS S1 and S2, the baseline that's come up here. The GRI, the good old GRI, 25 years plus and beyond. The TCFD, the alignment with the climate-related frameworks are now converging with the new baseline there. And the SEBI, this BRSR core is coming now, the enforcer, and not just for the top 1,000, but also for the MSMEs and also the, the kind of core and the comparison that is there. The SEBI has given the option there. The voluntary pledges are giving you the mandatory assured disclosures there. All the standards are getting consolidated. So that makes it easier for us to understand what is to be done. For a company to choose what platform to look at, how to report, this becomes easier going forward. And by 2030, hopefully, there'll be one report. A lot of companies think that the BRSR is one report, but companies that anyway are doing the GRI reporting of the framework, looking at CDP or looking at TCFD, again, there's one way where the integration will happen very soon here. So ESG is a driver of value, not just cost here. So the lower cost of capital and risk as ESG maturity rises is what you see here. The resilience increases and also the durability increases. So this, friends, is what ESG is all about: sustainability. To sustain. Lower, resilient, durable is what makes this sustainable. So top line growth, cost reductions, the regulatory and legal ease of reporting and assurance, higher productivity. There has to be return on investment, right, friends? If there is some things you do on ESG, it can't just be a cost in it. There has to be return on investment also. It will also support the financial bottom line there. And therefore, the investment will come in there. It plugs in an optimized investment and assets there. So ESG, again, is a driver of value. It's not just cost, because everyone sees ESG as something that takes cost. Kitna kharcha karna padega? The first question a CEO will ask. The CFO will say this much, this much, this much. So what are the return on investment? We'll understand how this works in a triple bottom line context there, but this is the biggest value that's going to come in from ESG going forward here. So friends, sustainability now moves into the value chain here. Most emissions obviously sit beyond the factory gate. The scope 3 challenge is what we're talking about. And how do you engage the suppliers? A lot of companies we've met with, how do they assess the suppliers? How do they engage the suppliers? How do they get them to understand that it's not really there? A lot of companies look within, not without here. How do they mandate? How do they educate? We spoke about the pharmaceutical supply chain initiative where Pfizer does a big brother. Some of the companies, Novartis, does good stuff to get everyone on board here. But this is where we could also look at getting suppliers on board here in a more equal way here. Sustainability is also about total employee engagement and total stakeholder engagement. How to engage the stakeholders who will judge how the value chain goes in here. The value chain we speak about here, it's about, all know about what is the scope 1 and scope 2. The direct within the premises, the bought out electricity or bought out fuel or bought out heat is scope 2. Scope 3 is the business travel, deliveries. And again, you could look at their contributions to the greenhouse gas emissions, upstream and downstream, the scope 3 direct and the indirect. And again, there's also the avoided emissions, scope 4 that's coming up, that's never netted there. And again, there is, as you speak topically, what's the company's hormuz? What is the hidden dependency is the question there, the missing box there. All supply chains need to identify what is it all about here as sustainability moves into the value chain out here. So from reported assured ESG data, a lot of people now focus on reporting with credibility here. It all began with investors a long time back to understand how to assess a company, but regulators and investors are demanding comparable, decision useful ESG data there. It's not just hubris, any data you can put in there. It doesn't work that way. Assurance is climbing from voluntary to limited to reasonable assurance. That's the progress. Some of you attended the HSSE risk webinars will understand what this means here. And there's a global guideline that makes the disclosures comparable. As we speak, a lot of platforms, including digital, where each of these, the interoperability with these standards, including the BRSR, works well here. There's also satellite carbon tracking and automated audits that makes the claim verifiable. So again, the assurance ladder is also something they're looking at. But again, the best part is take it self-reported. Even suppliers, we ask them to do the reporting, look at us, give them assessment checklist, let them do self-assurance. And then you kind of go ahead and do your audits and then do a limited assurance and get them to do a reasonable assurance there. So friends, with that in the context there are new mandates for creating careers. There are careers that's coming in now. Again, for all of you thinking there, what is happening there? The new pull, regulation creates roles there. A mandatory assurance and disclosure opens a need for qualified ESG specialists. From a generalist to a specialist, the shift, a lot of people in the earlier part thought that having a smattering of knowledge, they say the ESG, like a blind man looks at an elephant, somebody catches the tail, somebody catches the trunk, somebody catches the ear, everyone is right. But going to specialization, the value moves to deep expertise in standards, carbon, finance, and nature there. And of course, the need to be into data and AI fluency. If you're not able to use a chat GPT, not able to do Copilot, can't, you'll spend a lot of non-valuated activities doing a lot of hard work, which is unnecessary. So you need to also pair the sector strength with analytics to lead the field here. So where are the new roles growing? The talents, opportunity, friends, is assurance and audits. Sustainable finance is coming up in a big way. A lot of companies are looking at focused carbon, green bonds coming in a big way here. Climate and nature positive strategy. ESG data science has become big. The data science that comes in now, there are data specialists, analysts that look at just data science alone. If you've been into a Bloomberg, you'll understand what are the data points. A rating agency, you know that there are as many as 900 plus data points, and each of them updated each and every day. Every time Trump wakes up and tweets, there is a kind of feedback and that impact there on all of these here. And scope 3 and value chain of management here is big here. These are the mandates defining new careers there. Finally, friends, for us is what are the opportunities here? What happens now? Is it big? Those who haven't kind of are not the nerds on AI, what happens to us? Where do we go? What is there a future there? Is a light at the end of the tunnel that of an incoming bullet train? Let's find out where demand, skills, and talent gaps are heading here. So, friends, it's maturing, not shrinking, but shifting fast here. A lot of friends feel that even in the data analytics, AI fields, AI is taking over jobs. But again, there's a boom. I think like happened in the pandemic, a lot of people thought that drove in fast growth and booming demand. A lot of people had salary cuts, etc. But the booming demand really had it there. And that is the time when actually I was involved in ESG in a big way here. Correction happened since 2023. Fewer openings and flatter growth in sustainability teams per se. But now as I speak, the specialization is going. The demand is shifting from generalists to deep specialists to topics that grow complex there. And that's where we have the opportunity there. In India also, there's a regulated tailwind. SEBI has mandated now the BRSR core, reasonable assurance of the top 1,000 listed companies, creating an urgent shortage of qualified ESG auditors and assurance providers. I can speak from being there in the know that this is something going to come up here, that the market is going to boom for all of us here. Here's an opportunity for us to grab by both hands here. The roles in demand and the skills behind them, the ESG auditor, assurance provider, the strategist consultant, a finance specialist, a climate and nature positive lead, and of course the data and analytics analyst. Speaking about ESG maturity, going from lagging to leading to looking at being predictive rather than being proactive. This is what the skill that would set you apart. So friends, the assurance and reporting standards as they merge together, the carbon accounting and scope 3. All of you have been to the HSSE sessions will understand this better. The data fluency in AI is something you really need to leverage. None of us can be behind this here. The deep sector knowledge, the era of the generalist is fading there, again, sad to say there. But sustainable finance and green capital literacy is coming up in a big way out here. So friends, for the next 5 years, all you need to do is look at specialize, pick a domain, focus on it, get trained, get ESG reporting assurance credentials, build the data fluency, follow the mandates, get think the value chain, think big, think beyond the boundaries, and show the impact. This is what will get you staying ahead. You can translate the ESG work into measurable business and climate value there. So friends, this is the future. This is what will get you ahead. And this is what you need to be focusing on here. So friends, just to summarize here, we spoke about the triple bottom line, the environmental, financial, and social. The financial has the focus on revenue growth, productivity, profit margins, return on investment, capital costs. If you're a listed company, the valuation, the enterprise, the risk management, you have red herring perspective, you look at the internal, external risk, the appeal to the investors. This is the economic prosperity. This is measured by the economic performance. Quarter tak kiya hua financial report there. On the social front, you look at the community, the social impact, health and safety. You can't do a business harming people, killing people. Also fair compensation, equal opportunity, education, recognition. We speak about the equity measured by the social performance there. And then there is what we call the environmental stewardship. There's the environmental or the operational aspects, energy and water, materials, emissions and waste, operational excellence, design efficiencies, life systems impacts, process improvements. Friends, each of these is measured by performance parameters there. The typical old front, we measured only by the economic here. But the addition of the social and environmental to the economic is what is coming up now here. So they say that between the triple bottom lines here, if you were to look at the financial, it looks at decision making, if it is viable, kitna deti hai, what is the return on investment? There is what the question will be asked here. For the people from the social front, is it equitable is the question you would ask. On the environment front, is it bearable on the planet is what you ask here. The triple bottom line, the hot spot, the sweet spot is the one in the center where you ask, is this sustainable? And this is what we measure as the ESG performance there. So typically, this is called the ESG triple bottom line. And we speak here of the environmental, social, and governance. Together, these three factors help determine the quality of governance. Like I said, this is where the investing community started looking at sustainability in a big way here. And this is the triple bottom line, the addition of the social and the environmental to the traditional financial year. And this is what we call the profits, the people, and the planet there. And typically, this is what we measure here. If you were to summarize the entire session into what is the next stage for us, 2030 or beyond here, a CFO would wear a hat and say, how profitable are we, or what is the profits, how viable are we? A CHRO would ask, how equitable is the decision here? A COO, a chief operating officer, would say, how bearable is the decision? But the C of the company, and that's the hat all of us got to wear and ensure that the decision is sustainable there. So friends, ESG largely is a connector of all the bottom line initiatives. It's something that creates long-term stakeholder value. You're managing risks and embracing opportunities. And any decision you make here, setting up a new plant, a new project, or doing some change here, it needs to pass through these three C's: be equitable, bearable, and therefore also viable and sustainable here. So this is what it says, and we focus about sustainable development, the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet its needs. This is what this talks about here. So this is the long and short of ESG. They speak about the profits, people, and the planet. That also is the triple bottom line that links to the fourth one, that's the purpose. And the purpose is what defines the organization. But the cause without an overarching purpose, prepared leadership, is what you need to connect with. Just ticking the box on the triple P doesn't help. And finally, what's happening now in India also is the protest. And what's happening at Jantar Mantar, also the voice of the people there. Be it data centers or be it things that's happening, the voice of the people, stakeholder inclusion is key here. And that, friends, is the fifth P, protest here. That's the short and long of ESG, friends. So friends, four things to carry out of the session. The 2030 window is closing on the targets, the SDGs, and more corporate goals. The climate risk is physical and rising. What are the scenarios speak about? The climate risk is going beyond the standards there. It's going beyond the roof there. Whatever the risk scenario is, the risk continuous scenario there, we're going to hit that here. And the fuel that ignites point beyond 300 degrees is drying out fast. Vision 2030 is four commitments: water, waste, circularity, and emissions. All of these are backed by mandatory disclosure, and the focus there is going to be focused there. And the talent market is maturing. Specialists and assurance really need to look at skills with the focus of the target that's coming in, the changes coming there. We spoke about what drives the demand. It's a supply and demand gap there. So that, friends, are the four things to carry out the session. And that's the context there. Let me say that with just 5 years to reach the goals, we need to shift into overdrive there. Thank you, and we'll hand it over.